15 minutes from now, I'm supposed to walk down the aisle, smile, say yes. But I didn't come here to marry him. I came here to end something. What his family did to me, what they tried to make me sign, they thought I'd be too scared to fight back. They were wrong. I signed it. I played my part. Now it's my turn. The makeup artist was still fussing over my lips when the knock came. 3 firm raps on the dressing room door. Not hesitant. Not polite. The kind of knock that says, "We own this place." "Come in," I said, my eyes locked on the mirror. The door opened. Daniel's parents stepped in like royalty, flawless, polished, prepared for the cameras outside. Margaret Blake wore a bone-colored sheath dress and diamonds that looked too heavy for her delicate neck. Charles Blake's navy suit was so sharp it could have cut the air, and behind them, quiet and forgettable in a gray suit, was the family attorney. That told me everything. "You look lovely, dear," Margaret said with that careful smile she practiced in boardrooms. "Just a small detail we need to handle before the ceremony." I didn't move. "What detail?" The lawyer stepped forward and opened a leather folder, already tabbed, already marked. "Just a formal signing. Standard practice. Mr. and Mrs. Blake asked me to bring this to you before the ceremony begins." "Daniel didn't mention this?" "Oh, sweet girl," Margaret said, brushing imaginary dust off her wrist. "Let's not make this dramatic. Every smart woman signs one. You understand how important it is to keep things clean, organized." I took the folder, sat still, read. Premarital agreement. Daniel Blake and Annie Holloway. Clean? Organized? It was a weapon, disguised as a formality. Clause 4. No claim to marital assets under any condition. Clause 7. Immediate forfeiture of custody of any children if marital trust is broken. Clause 11. Confidentiality agreement regarding family affairs, business practices, and private matters. Clause 15. Arbitration only. No lawsuits, no trials, no public record. This wasn't a prenup. It was a cage. I flipped back to the first page and stared at my name at the top. They had printed it in bold, like they were branding me. "What happens if I don't sign?" I asked. Charles Blake cleared his throat. "Then the ceremony is postponed. Indefinitely." No emotion. Just fact. He'd said those exact words before, probably at a hostile acquisition meeting. I looked up at all 3 of them. Margaret's eyes were confident. The lawyer was indifferent. Charles was already done with the conversation. They expected fear, confusion, panic. What they got was silence. I reached for the pen. Margaret smiled, relieved. "Smart girl," I signed. Each letter of my name burned into that paper like a match head. The lawyer closed the folder and nodded. "Thank you, Miss Holloway. We'll see you at the altar." They turned and walked out. I waited until the door clicked shut. Then I stood up. Slowly. I faced the mirror. My reflection didn't flinch. This wasn't surrender. It was ignition. It started with a necklace. Or more accurately, the absence of one. A week before the wedding, I came home to our condo after a meeting with the florist. It was around 9 p.m., and Daniel said he'd be at the gym. I remember that specifically because his shoes weren't by the door. They always were. Size 12, gray soles, obsessively clean. That night, gone. His phone, though, was still on the counter. Charging. Screen lit up when I walked past. Nothing suspicious, not really. A calendar reminder. Then a message. I didn't mean to read it. It just flashed. "I can still taste you. Thursday can't come soon enough." No name, no emoji ID, just those words. I didn't panic. Not outwardly. I plugged in my own phone next to his. Sat down. Waited. Daniel walked in 15 minutes later, towel slung over his shoulder, hair damp. He kissed my cheek like everything was normal. "What's up?" he asked, tossing his keys in the bowl like he did every night. I smiled. Nothing, just tired. He didn't notice the slight tremor in my hand. Or maybe he did and didn't care. That was always his strength. Or his weakness. He assumed people wouldn't look too closely. He was right about most people. But not me. That night, after he fell asleep, I went through his phone. It took 3 tries to guess the passcode. My birth date, then his, then her initials. I wish I could say I was shocked, that I cried. Instead, I scrolled. Screenshots, voice memos, hotel receipts, and photos. Photos of my best friend, Kara, naked. In the dress shop I'd taken her to for my final fitting. The timestamp was 5 days ago. The caption, "Does this count as something borrowed?" I didn't throw the phone. I didn't scream. I studied. Because pain is just data. If you're patient enough to hold it without flinching, it will tell you everything you need to know. The next morning, I called Nora. Nora Wood, former prosecutor, current specialist in corporate divorce warfare. We met at a fundraiser last year. She wore all black, said almost nothing, and made 3 powerful men leave early. She picked up on the first ring. "It's me," I said. "I'm listening," she replied. "I found out he's been cheating. With Kara." Silence. Then, "Do you want to end the wedding?" "No," I said, voice steady. "I want to burn it down." There was a pause. "You're sure?" "I am." "Then you'll need leverage," Nora said. "You'll need proof. And you'll need to stay calm until the moment you don't." I spent the next 4 days building the case. Not for court. For exposure. First, I traced the hotel charges. Daniel had been using the company card, Blake Holdings, to cover rooms, meals, and luxury car rentals. That made it corporate fraud. Class C felony, depending on the amount. I bribed a concierge with $1,000 cash and a copy of Kara's Instagram to get security footage. Then I accessed Kara's cloud backup. Her password was her dog's name. Tragic. Every photo, every message, every moment they thought was private. Downloaded. I set up a secure drive with triple encryption, mirrored it across 4 dummy accounts. Printed everything, cataloged by date and subject. Then came the hard part. Pretending nothing was wrong. I went to the final tasting. I took calls with the planner. I even posed with Daniel for our Countdown to Love shoot. I smiled. Until my jaw ached. Until I started to forget which version of myself was real. Nora came to my apartment Friday evening. She brought red wine and silence. I showed her the files. She nodded once. "You have enough. More than enough." "Good," I said. She watched me for a long moment. "You're not doing this for revenge." "No," I agreed. "I'm doing this because they think I'm disposable." And then I told her my plan. The streaming setup, the files, the live feed, the vows, the trap. Nora leaned back on my couch. Her eyes were sharper than they were at the fundraiser. "You're not just taking them down." "No." I looked at the printed prenup I'd stolen from Daniel's drawer. "I'm rewriting the ending." The thing no one tells you about revenge, it needs infrastructure. This wasn't about catching a cheater or posting screenshots with petty captions. I wasn't here to make him squirm. I was building a goddamn execution. Public, final, precise. The moment I signed that prenup, the plan had already been in motion. Nora called it Project Eulogy. I called it math. There were 6 days left until the wedding. Every hour had to count. Day 1, surveillance. I met a hotel security guard named Joel in the loading dock of the Rosemont Grand at 3:12 a.m. I brought cash, credentials, and a USB loaded with fake inspection documents showing urgent HVAC compliance, flagged on the 12th floor. The same floor Daniel and Kara used for their meetings. Joel didn't ask many questions. He took the envelope and handed over access to the floor plans and camera routing software. His only request? Just don't bring this back to me. I wouldn't. I had no intention of looking back. Day 2, recording. I rented a studio space 2 blocks from the venue. A dead-end photography company had defaulted on the lease. No one was watching it. Inside, I set up a 4-camera livestream rig with a black backdrop, soundproof insulation, and 2 backup power supplies. It looked like a podcast set. It would become the stage for their ruin. Every file I had on the Blakes, corporate fraud, surveillance footage, voice memos, screenshots, was uploaded to 3 encrypted servers with location-based auto-deletion triggers. If I didn't log in every 72 hours, the files would go public automatically. That wasn't paranoia, that was protection. Nora's team included a penetration expert who tested my server against brute force hacks and phishing links. It held. So far. Day 3, redundancy. 1 copy of everything went to an anonymous Google Drive, with password fragments split between 3 burner phones placed in different locations across the city. I used an old burner to mail a prepaid envelope to a law office in Berlin, not because I needed it, but because I wanted them to wonder how deep this went. Then I rehearsed the vows. Not the romantic ones, the ones that would break Daniel's smile in real time. I practiced them in front of the mirror while Nora watched. She didn't interrupt, didn't blink. "You're not nervous," she said. "No," I replied. "I'm editing history." Day 4. Infiltration. I booked a seat for Kara at the wedding under a false name. Not front row, back row, far left. A decoy camera bag beside her. She wouldn't recognize the legal observers beside her. 2 suits, real but quiet. Both holding signed affidavits from victims of the Blake Foundation's fake scholarship scheme. I'd met one of them in a courthouse parking lot 6 months ago. She was 17. Denied her tuition refund when Charles Blake's board cut funding overnight. Now she would sit calmly in her red dress, waiting for the screen to light up. The dress wasn't symbolic. It was tactical. Margaret would see it. She'd remember it. And then, she'd panic. Day 5, contingency. I made one final call to a name I hadn't spoken in 4 years. Detective Reagan Stokes. Vice, turned private. Once a lover, now a useful shadow. "I don't need protection," I told her. "I need a legal witness, off the record." "You planning something?" "Yes." She didn't hesitate. "Text me the time." I hung up. Then I pulled out the wedding itinerary and circled the moment of impact. 2:47 p.m. The vows. Day 6. Quiet. The night before the wedding, I sat alone in the hotel suite Daniel's family had paid for. It was excessive. Champagne in a crystal bucket, white orchids in every corner, a leather-bound menu for room service, a $5,000 apology for what they knew was a trap. I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Not thinking, not crying, just calibrating. Nora texted me one word. "Ready?" I replied. "Loaded." Then I silenced my phone and slept for exactly 5 hours. No dreams. Just the weight of everything about to come undone. The sky was too perfect. Clear, gold-washed, no wind. The kind of October day that photographers pray for and planners sell in expensive brochures. The Blake estate had been transformed into a floral cathedral. White orchids climbed latticework arches. The chairs were lacquered, spaced just far enough apart to imply exclusivity. Guests were arriving in waves. Chauffeured Teslas, champagne flutes passed at the gates. A quartet played something soft, expensive, and forgettable. From the second-floor window of the bridal suite, I watched them gather. Hedge fund managers, political donors, plastic-faced women in bone-colored stilettos. They thought they were here to witness love. They were here to witness detonation. My dress was already on. No one helped me into it. I didn't need help. The satin hugged me with surgical precision. The veil stayed pinned by pure calculation. My heels, 6 inches high, made no sound against the marble as I stepped away from the window and toward the door. Behind it, 2 bridesmaids waited. Cousins from Daniel's side, polite, polished, irrelevant. "You look amazing," one of them said. "Like a movie star." I smiled. "Let's go." The processional started exactly at 2:30. Daniel was already at the altar. Black tuxedo, confident smirk, hair neatly pushed back like always. He looked at the crowd the way a CEO looks at shareholders, charming, composed, already certain of the outcome. He didn't know he was standing at the edge of his own collapse. Margaret sat front row, of course, her pearl earrings glinting, spine so straight it looked iron-cast. Her lips moved as I stepped into view, whispering something to Charles beside her. "Now she officially belongs to us." I heard it. Every syllable. I didn't stop walking. Each step was precise, controlled, like a storm pretending to be air. The crowd rose. Phones came out. Flashes popped. Guests turned in their seats. I saw Kara in the back row. She didn't see me. Yet. But Margaret did. Her head tilted just slightly. Her mouth twitched, recognition registering. Not just at the sight of Kara, but the 2 figures flanking her. Legal observers? Quiet? Watching? Predators in suits. Daniel still hadn't noticed. He was too focused on the optics, on the press photographer from Vanity Luxe, the one his mother paid to cover the event under the guise of modern legacy. The aisle felt longer than it was. Not because of nerves, because of control. Every movement, every breath, every blink was part of the rhythm I'd built over the last 6 days. At the end of the aisle, the priest stood waiting. He smiled warmly. I didn't return it. Daniel took my hand. "You made it," he whispered. I nodded once. Of course I did. We turned to face the altar. The priest began the opening blessing, his voice calm, rehearsed. The guests settled, heads tilted, waiting for the romance to unfold. But beneath the lace and flowers and $80,000 decor budget, the air was warping. Margaret kept glancing back. She felt it, the hairline fracture in her vision of perfection. Kara's red dress, the camera bag, the silence of the men beside her. I kept my face still. Daniel squeezed my hand as the priest continued. Promises, blessings, the usual script. I watched his jaw tighten slightly, the way it always did when he thought he was being impressive. He had no idea. None of them did. The priest smiled again, turning toward the crowd. "Before we continue, if anyone has reason why this couple should not be joined in holy matrimony," a pause, a perfect, pregnant pause. "Speak now, or forever. Hold your peace." Silence, and then 2 more minutes, exactly 2. The priest continued. More blessings, more rehearsed solemnity. Daniel whispered, "Almost there." He looked at me. I smiled back. But the smile wasn't mine. It was a countdown. 10 seconds later, the first crack opened. Margaret shifted forward. Charles leaned toward her. Their lawyer, seated 2 rows behind, stood. Not suddenly, not obviously. But enough to make one of the guests turn. It was beginning. But no one knew it yet. Daniel reached for the ring. I didn't take it. Not yet. I looked at the priest. And I spoke. "Before we exchange vows," I said clearly, stepping forward, "I have something to say." The crowd stirred. Phones came out again. Daniel blinked. "Annie, what are you doing?" I turned to face the guests. My voice didn't shake. "My name is Annie Holloway, and before I agree to anything, I want to say my own vows." I held up the microphone. To truth, to justice, and to showing everyone here exactly who the Blakes really are. The silence that followed wasn't shocked. It was surgical. The silence held. Then the whispering started. Soft, like leaves moving just before a storm breaks. I stepped back from the microphone, let the weight of my words hang in the air. Daniel stared at me like I'd just slipped out of character, like I'd forgotten my cue. "Annie," he hissed, hand tightening around mine. "What the hell are you doing?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. From the far back row, someone stood. The red dress was impossible to miss. It moved differently from the whites and creams around it, sharper, bolder, like it didn't belong, which was exactly the point. Kara. She didn't flinch under the dozens of heads that turned her way. Her blonde hair was slicked back, lips blood red, eyes unreadable. Not a trace of shame, not a single ounce of guilt. She wasn't hiding. She was waiting. Next to her sat two men in charcoal suits, almost invisible until they stood. No applause, no introductions. The camera bag on the floor between them zipped open. A hard drive appeared in one man's hands. In the other's, a black folder, thick, marked confidential. Daniel turned to see what everyone was looking at. The moment he saw her, he paled. Not red, not pink. Pale. Paper pale. His jaw slackened just slightly, his eyes flicked to the suits, and then to me. "You invited her?" he whispered. "No," I said. "I subpoenaed her." A wave of gasps rippled across the seated guests. People craned their necks. One of Daniel's uncles muttered something about in poor taste. Someone's wine glass tipped, but no one stood to stop it. Because deep down, they knew something was wrong. Margaret shot to her feet. "Annie, if this is some kind of stunt, I promise you—" "Promise me what?" I asked, turning. "That you'll rewrite the narrative? Silence the witnesses? Like you did when the foundation lost $2.3 million in donations last year?" That did it. Charles's face drained of color. The family attorney, 2 rows behind, pulled out his phone. Too late. One of Nora's associates was already at the back door, hand on the light switch. 10 seconds later, the lights dimmed. The altar screen flickered to life. Margaret's voice cut out mid-sentence, and then the title card appeared. Bridal Massacre, The Blake Family Files, Live. Guests froze. No one moved. Some of them thought it was part of the ceremony. A quirky wedding montage, maybe. Then the first clip played. Footage. Daniel and Kara in bed. Hotel logo in the corner. Timestamp. 2 weeks ago. Daniel's voice, low and laughing. "She's so fucking easy to lie to. I could hand her a contract that says she's property, and she'd still walk down the aisle." The crowd erupted. Not in applause, in gasps. Disbelief. Mouths opened, hands over faces, phones lifted, recording. Someone dropped their champagne glass. It shattered like the illusion they'd all been fed. The screen cut to the next clip. Audio. Margaret on a speakerphone. "She's not family. She's a placeholder. We'll phase her out within the first year." Next, Charles, on a Zoom call with a developer, funneling corporate funds through dummy charities. Then another clip. Another. Each worse than the last. Every betrayal Daniel tried to bury was now public record. In 4K. He turned on me. Eyes wide, face contorted. You psycho." "Security," I said calmly. 2 guards stepped forward from the tent flaps. "Not venue staff. Mine. Prepaid. Background checked. Flown in." Daniel lunged toward me. They intercepted. Held him back. He thrashed. "This is defamation. You can't do this. You signed the prenup?" "Yes," I said coldly. "And you recorded yourself laughing about how I'd sign anything." Margaret screamed something, but her voice was lost under the rising storm of voices in the crowd. Kara still stood in the back. Her face wasn't smug anymore. She looked embarrassed. That was enough. I turned back to the priest. "Shall we continue?" I asked. He stepped back, mouth open, uncertain. The guests weren't seated anymore. They were filming, whispering, rushing toward exits, calling for cars. The orchestra had stopped playing. The only music now was the digital playback of the Blake family falling apart. Daniel dropped to one knee, not in proposal, in collapse. His mother was trying to shut down the projector. She couldn't. Nora's second team had already rerouted it through a private server hosted off-site. There was no off switch, only full exposure. I stepped toward Daniel, slowly. My veil drifted in the backdraft of panic. He looked up at me like a man drowning in a suit. "I told you I'd say yes," I said quietly. Then I leaned in. But I never said what to. There's a silence that only happens when people realize they're complicit. It's not the hush of shock. It's not even fear. It's weight. As the final clip finished playing on the screen behind the altar, Daniel, shirtless, whispering, "She's just leverage," into Kara's neck. I turned slowly back to the crowd, phones everywhere, faces pale. A few guests had already fled. The rest hovered between fascination and horror. Daniel was still on his knees, not out of remorse. He wasn't capable of that, but pure collapse. "You've made your point," he gasped, trying to regain his voice. "Annie, please, this is enough." I ignored him. Instead, I looked at the priest. He was frozen, caught between professionalism and survival instinct. I held the microphone. "I believe we left off at the vows," I said evenly. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I turned back to Daniel. "My vows," I said, stepping forward. "I wrote my own." A ripple moved through the remaining guests. Some sat down again. Others stayed standing, unwilling to move, like watching a car crash they couldn't look away from. I took a breath. Not out of nerves, but timing. "Annie Holloway," I began, my voice sharp and measured. "Do not take you, Daniel Blake, to be my lawfully wedded anything." Margaret audibly gasped. "I do not promise to honor, obey, or protect the legacy of a family built on coercion, manipulation, and fraud." I paused. Let it sink in. "I do not agree to silence. I do not agree to ownership. I do not agree to disappearing into the shadow of your name." I turned toward the guests. "But I do vow this. I will not let any other woman, or man, fall into your trap again." A beat. Then I turned back to Daniel. "I vow to expose every shell corporation, every stolen donation, every lie you told behind closed doors." His face was slick with sweat, makeup melting, the facade gone. And most of all, I leaned in, just close enough for only him to hear. "I vow to never let you forget who burned it all down." Behind me, the screen flickered once more, now looping footage. Daniel laughing in bed, Margaret slandering me, Charles covering money trails. A greatest hits of rot, on repeat. And then came the final blow. From the back, Kara moved. She stepped into the aisle, slowly, deliberately. All eyes snapped to her. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She handed something to the legal observer beside her, a flash drive, and nodded. He raised it to the crowd. "Full testimony," he announced. "Verified, time-stamped. Copies have been submitted to the State Bar, the IRS, and the Attorney General's office." Margaret screamed something incoherent. Daniel shouted, "She's lying! You're all insane!" But no one listened to them anymore. Their power was gone, not because I stole it, because I revealed what they did with it. The priest slowly stepped back, out of frame. The guests began filing out. Some offered me looks of awe, others, shame. But no one looked at Daniel. Not anymore. I turned back to him. He was standing now, barely. "You think this ruins me?" he said, voice trembling. "I can come back from this." "No," I said. "You can't." "This isn't justice," he spat. "This is a hit job." I smiled, calm and cold. "You're right. It's not justice. It's design." Behind me, the legal observers packed up. One of Nora's assistants shut down the projector. The screen went dark. But the story was already out. Live streamed. Backed up. Sent to 6 media outlets, 4 legal organizations, and 1 anonymous leak forum. There was no containing it now. Margaret tried to stand, but when she looked out at the garden, at the guests abandoning their champagne, stepping over ruined flower arrangements, whispering into phones, she sank back down. For the first time in her life, she looked small. Charles sat beside her, staring into space. They weren't outraged. They were unraveling. Security approached me from the side, asked if I needed to be escorted out. I shook my head. I'll walk. And I did. Right past the flowers, the ruined arch, the shattered glasses, and the $1,000 candles still flickering like nothing happened. At the edge of the tent, I turned back. Daniel was standing at the altar alone, like a man at his own funeral, surrounded by the ashes of his legacy. I stepped outside into the light, and the cameras followed me. The tent was chaos. People were running, but carefully, like they didn't want to crease their designer shoes. Women clutched their clutches and pearls. Men raised their phones to their ears, barking orders to drivers, assistants, anyone who could get them out of there fast. But no one ran toward Daniel. He stood frozen at the altar, hands limp at his sides, the collar of his designer tux now damp with sweat. His perfect jaw clenched. His eyes darted across the wreckage. Everything he'd built was unraveling in real time, and I hadn't even said goodbye. Nora stepped onto the altar with the quiet precision of someone who didn't need attention to control the room. She didn't look at the guests. She didn't acknowledge the screams. She simply held up a folder. Charles Blake's lawyer turned just in time to see her unfold the first document. "You've been served," she said plainly, holding it out. He didn't take it. She let it drop at his feet. "That's a formal complaint," she continued, "filed with the Department of Justice. Wire fraud, misappropriation of charitable funds, misleading tax documentation." Margaret tried to speak, but her throat gave out. She clutched her pearls instead. "And that's just the warm-up," Nora said, handing another envelope to the man next to her. "One of these goes to every regulatory agency Blake Holdings ever tried to buy off." The servers, those still standing, watched from the wings, stunned. Some even filmed. One of the flower girls had started crying. Daniel finally found his voice. "This is insane," he shouted. "This entire thing is legal," I said, stepping back onto the altar. "Extremely." He turned on me. "You think this makes you powerful?" "No," I said, "but it makes me free." He lunged forward, but the security guards from earlier reappeared. One hand on each shoulder. Not aggressive, just firm. They didn't drag him away. They let him stay. Because that was worse. "Turn it off!" Margaret screamed at no one in particular. "Shut the damn thing down!" The projector had already been disconnected. The damage was done. But the Blakes hadn't realized the real exposure hadn't happened in that tent. It was online. The live stream was still running from the auxiliary channel. Hosted off-site. Mirrored on multiple platforms. Being watched, clipped, and distributed faster than any NDA could touch it. One guest, a mid-level tech executive, was already on his phone typing furiously. "This is going to be on page 1 by morning," he muttered. "It's already on Twitter," someone else said. 2 million views and climbing. Kara had left. No one saw her slip out. But that was fine. Her part was done. I walked to the center of the altar and picked up the bouquet I'd dropped earlier. White orchids, $700 worth. Supposed to symbolize purity. I tossed them aside. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, raising my voice just enough, "thank you for coming." A few heads turned. "I know you expected a wedding, but what you got instead?" I motioned to the papers on the floor. The frozen Blake family, the murmuring crowd, is a confession. Consider it televised. And with that, I stepped down from the altar. Cameras followed. Outside, reporters had started gathering. They hadn't been invited, but they'd been tipped. By me. A woman in a navy pantsuit held a mic to her mouth. This is the Blake family wedding, where sources confirm a massive scandal has just erupted involving financial fraud and potential criminal investigations. I passed her without a word. Nora was already in the car. When I climbed in beside her, she didn't say anything. She just handed me a tablet. The video had gone viral. Comments exploded across the feed. True. Justice 47. This isn't a wedding. It's an execution. Iconic. Finance report alternate 82. Holy hell, I knew something was off with Blake Holdings. Our bride burner. Someone give her a Netflix deal, immediately. Kara cancelled. Kara's silence was deafening. Damn. Nora watched me watching the numbers tick up. You sure you're ready for what comes next? I closed the tablet. I didn't come for peace, I said. I came to watch them burn. She nodded once. Well, welcome to hell. The driver pulled onto the road. Behind us, the estate blurred into the distance, a garden full of silk, ash, and silence. But the world? The world was only just beginning to watch. By the time we reached the city, the story had already metastasized. Headlines screamed across every device screen I passed. Blake wedding implodes in corporate scandal. Bride goes rogue at two-minister ceremony. Charity fraud tied to Blake Holdings uncovered during vows. We didn't need to feed the media. We had built them into the system. Press packets were pre-scheduled, files watermarked, video files encrypted and timed. Nora's team executed it like a military campaign. Every asset of the Blake empire was bleeding. That evening, the Blake Holdings homepage went dark. Their social accounts locked down. But it was too late. The files were already with regulators. And the press. One of the largest business news networks had reached out before sundown, begging for a live interview with me. I said nothing. I let the silence speak for me. Instead, we watched. From Nora's office, high-rise, soundproof, glass walls like teeth. We monitored in real time. Their stock plummeted. Donor funds pulled. One of the banks froze all outgoing transfers within hours. It was happening. Not metaphorically, literally. Daniel's name trended globally under hashtags like hashish vows of exposure and hashish groomed and doomed. Memes poured in. My face, mid-vow. Margaret's face, mid-collapse. Kara in red, now dubbed the ghost of side chick present. Then came the second hit. Our contact at the IRS confirmed what we already knew. Blake Foundation filings didn't match expenditures. They hadn't for years. An audit request was already in motion. By nightfall, Charles's name had been pulled from the board of a medical tech startup he'd invested in. Margaret's exclusive gala appearance for a global education foundation? Cancelled. Publicly. Loudly. She was toxic now. Daniel, too. He hadn't been disbarred yet, but whispers had started. Screenshots, pulled quotes, emails leaked. His mistress might have been a side story, but the money trail? That was main feed content. I stood at the edge of Nora's office, arms folded. She handed me a glass of champagne. It was cold, dry, expensive. I don't drink, I said. Not even for this? I looked at the city below, blinking, sprawling, unaware it had just witnessed a reverse coronation. Then I took the glass. One sip. Then I set it down. This isn't a celebration, I said. She nodded. No, it's a burial. The banquet hall, which had been scheduled for the Blake wedding reception, sat empty. Food spoiled, wine uncorked, live jazz band, cancelled. Photographers, unpaid. Guests scattered, humiliated. $1,000 cake carved with gold-dusted fondant had been carted off to the kitchen like a corpse. And through it all, Daniel hadn't said a word publicly. No statement, no video. Just silence. He was hiding. Probably lawyering up. But it didn't matter. We had receipts, witnesses, digital backups, and a dozen more sources ready to testify. I had spent 6 days assembling an arsenal. Now it was firing without my touch. That was the point. At exactly 11:47 p.m., a notification blinked on Nora's monitor. Federal investigation opened, Blake Holdings. We watched it together. Quiet. The system was slow, but it was waking up. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. Voicemail. I didn't recognize the voice until the end. Daniel. Annie, he said. You made your point. You won. You burned it all down. I hope it was worth it. Click. No apology. No accountability. Just another man trying to paint himself as a victim of consequences. I deleted it. Worth it? That wasn't the question. The real question was, would I stop? And the answer was simple. Not yet. 1 month later, the Blake name was ash. Not metaphorically, not symbolically. Just ash. Blown across news cycles, torched in think pieces, dissected by financial analysts, legal blogs, divorce podcasts, and 24-hour scandal reels. They tried to contain it. They failed. Because this wasn't a story. It was a system collapse. Daniel had gone silent since the wedding. No social media, no statements, no interviews. Last I heard, he'd moved to a gated estate in upstate New York, his parents' summer villa, the one they used to rent out for board retreats. The silence wasn't strategic. It was survival. His law license had been suspended while the state bar conducted its review, not just of the wedding footage, which had gone viral, but of emails, transaction logs, and audio files leaked anonymously to legal watchdogs. The evidence was clear. The question now was only how long the disbarment would take. Margaret hadn't appeared in public since the livestream, not even through PR. Her charity board affiliations crumbled within days. Foundations don't like scandals, especially when they're recorded in 4K, projected onto an altar, and live-streamed with donation links to legal aid for survivors. Charles, once a shadowy kingmaker, had tried to salvage some influence. It didn't stick. His name had become shorthand for financial rot. Even the whisper of association tanked 2 partnerships in less than a week. Meanwhile, I was busy building. Not revenge, infrastructure. Bridal Kill wasn't a passion project. It was an operation. I launched it with Nora's team and a rotating panel of pro bono legal experts. It wasn't just for women. It was for anyone trapped inside coercive legal frameworks, marriage contracts, or NDAs designed to silence, not protect. We didn't just collect stories. We collected documents. Dozens at first, then hundreds. Prenups that dictated dress codes, enforced weight maintenance clauses, denied reproductive freedom, revoked child custody in case of dishonor. Contracts signed under duress, or worse, while high on medication. We verified them, cross-referenced case law, redacted identifying information, and posted the bones for everyone to see. This wasn't exposé, it was architecture, and people were watching. Bridal Kill trended for 9 consecutive days, not because of what I said at the altar, but because of what others were finally allowed to say. I'd opened a door, and behind it were thousands waiting with documents, audio files, bank records, private messages. Some sent it quietly, some demanded war. We gave them options. One law school asked to use our case studies in their syllabus. Another wanted to bring Nora in for a lecture titled Consent, Power, and the Legalization of Silence. We said yes. The press begged for another interview. I declined. The only clip of me that circulated came from a pre-recorded segment. One take, no makeup, no script. The host asked, "What would you say to people who think you overreacted?" I looked into the camera and said, "They handed me a contract. I gave them a funeral." I didn't smile, didn't blink, and that was all they needed. That sentence became a tagline, a sticker, a protest chant outside a courthouse in LA, a tweet printed and framed by a woman who'd just annulled a contract she never should have signed. Was I proud? Not the word I'd use, but I was certain. I hadn't just exposed one family, I'd exposed a formula, and now people had the blueprints. As for Daniel, the last report said he'd tried calling me again, left another voicemail. I didn't listen. He used to say, "Some brides throw rice, others throw tantrums. Now they throw subpoenas, and receipts, and evidence." The Blake name would survive, but not untouched, not worshipped, not feared. It would survive like a fossil, proof that something used to rule here, but not anymore. The chapel hadn't changed, not the way it looked at least. Same cold stone, same stained glass, same steps where I had once stood in white and rewired the trajectory of my life, and theirs. But something had shifted. Silence carried a different texture here now. It wasn't waiting for something to happen. It was aftermath. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. Nora would have talked me out of it. The press would have turned it into symbolism. But this wasn't for them. This was mine. I walked the aisle alone, past pews that had once been filled with cameras, gasps, expensive heels, and strategic applause. Now, dust, stillness, faint sunlight through fractured windows. And her, Margaret, sitting in the front row, motionless, gloved hands folded in her lap like she was waiting for a verdict that would never come. She wore black, the kind of black that isn't fashion. It's fallout. Her hair was pulled back tight, her skin pale. The pearls were gone. No foundation board, no press clippings, no legacy to manage. Just a mother, stripped. She didn't look surprised to see me. "Funny," she said without turning. "I always imagined you'd come back." I stood in the aisle, saying nothing. "I assume you've come to gloat?" she added. "No," I replied. "That part's over." Silence stretched. "I read the articles," she said finally. "They're calling you a feminist icon now, a disruptor, a revolutionary." Her voice wasn't sarcastic. It was tired. I didn't reply. "I was like you once," she said quietly. "Sharp, strategic, willing to sacrifice everything for control." "And look where it got you," I said. She nodded slowly. "Yes. Here." We sat in the quiet. No lawyers, no contracts, no microphones. "I used to think legacy was something you built through institutions," she said. "Now I realize legacy is just what survives you." "I agree," I said. She turned toward me. Her eyes were red. Not from tears, from erosion. "You destroyed us." "No," I said calmly. "You did. I just televised it." I stepped past her, toward the altar. No projector now. No screen. Just the raised platform where vows had been spoken and systems had been dismantled. I reached into my bag and pulled out a bouquet. Roses, black, not dyed. Bred that way. Hard to find. Expensive. Beautiful in a way that makes people uncomfortable. I placed them on the altar. No speech, no performance, just acknowledgement. Then I turned to leave. Margaret didn't follow. She stayed seated, staring at the flowers like they were a verdict written in thorns. Outside, the wind was colder, stronger. Leaves skated across the gravel as I walked to the gate. The estate loomed behind me, hollowed out, a monument to control gone brittle. My dress wasn't white anymore. I wore black now. Sleek, tailored, not mourning, authority, no veil, no softness. I was no longer a bride. I wasn't a widow either. I was something else entirely. In the distance, sirens murmured, faint, like echoes of a story already told. My story wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. And as I stepped through the iron gate, past the empty road where guests once arrived in limos, I let the wind scatter a single petal from the bouquet I had laid down. It tumbled backward, through the gate, across the stone. Like ash after a fire. Not a tragedy. A reminder.